For joining us tonight. Let's give them another round of applause. All right, so the first thing I would like to ask you, I know you've answered this question a million times regarding the conception of this project, but I do want to dig a bit deeper and talk about like the booster as a symbol, as a phenomenon. Yes, in certain contexts, Western media especially, the booster is demonized. If you've seen videos of folks boosting and comments of like TikTok and Instagram, people are like trashing them, but in this film you're honoring them. You're showing the ways that they keep folks fly, but they also support the community's economy. So if you could speak to what it's like conceiving of a project that's like desecrating the lens of respectability politics and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, well, first, I wrote a song 20 years ago called I Love Boosters that was based on like a lifetime of experiences and people I know and things like that. But I started thinking about recently, the media has talked a lot about shoplifting and boosters as the thing that's breaking down the economy. And there's all sorts of, I mean, it sounds like a lot of people in here would all see through the bullshit, but you know, it's making an excuse for the downward spiral of capitalism, and it doesn't talk about the other problems in the economy and uses people of color, because that's not all who do it, but that's what they show on the news, uses people of color as the scapegoat for everything that ails folks. And this has recently been heightened because, as The Intercept pointed out, that police unions have started paying for publicists to put out news that says you need police because of this. And then we see, you know, CEOs of companies admitting that no, it's actually the online sales that are making the stores close, all of those sorts of things. So I was interested again in the idea. And I'm always thinking about humanity and how the humanity of people are taken away with explanations of how the world works, right? And usually it's the humanity of the working class that's taken away. And I wanted to talk about folks in that world. I don't remember what the question was.
Okay. How you essentially like disrupted respectability politics.
Yeah, and that's what respectability politics are. It's saying that there is only poverty because people make bad choices. And reality is that capitalism must have poverty. There's a little thing on the end of I'm a Virgo, you can watch that, I won't go through this. But, capitalism must have poverty and exploitation in order to exist. And the way to hide that is to say, if people just weren't bad people, they wouldn't be poor. And that's what the respectability politics almost always is.
Thank you for that. And then to follow up on that, you have a film that centers around Keke Palmer, who plays Corvette, but also they're like a trio, three very beautiful brown-skinned black women. And I think there's often discourse regarding like black trauma and the depiction of it in films. It's like a tug of war. Some folks are like, we don't want to see our oppression on screen. Other folks are like, well, we do have to portray our reality. And I think your films and your series kind of balance both, like the whimsy, the adventure, the thrill and fight to stop the man, while also depicting the structural reality. So I want, if you could speak to that balance that you're able to maintain throughout your work as an artist.
Well, I think that, the difference is that I'm not just trying to expose the problems. I'm not just trying to say, I'm trying to get people involved in class struggle. And so, um, and so there's an analysis of why it exists. And there also is the reality that, there's even inside of that, nothing is all the way one. And to me, I think stuff that doesn't have comedy is less real than a comedy, right? Because you have to do a lot of work to extract happiness and joy from a thing, you know. Um, even in jail, even during chattel slavery, people sing songs. There's all of that exists, and so I think that sometimes people are reacting to this way of painting people that intends to expose trauma, but ends up in the middle of it, taking away some of folks' humanity. And so I think the difference is that my analysis has to do with the fact that we're in a system where we're in an economic system that demands a certain poverty, but doesn't have to do, it's not just coming from someone's bad upbringing and terrible situation. It has to do with a whole system. So I think maybe that's the key that lets me expand on things in our existence that make it feel a little different.
Thank you. And then this cast. Let's give a round of applause for the cast. Naomi Taylor, Don, you have screen and stage powerhouse, Carrie Young, who you've worked with before, Jet Li. We can go down the list of all the cast.
Yeah, I mean, they make it easy. They make it really easy. You can have all sorts of visual gags, and you could have, you could have a scene where you spend $10 million on the VFX for that scene, and if you don't buy the person that's there sitting in the seat reacting to it, it doesn't feel real. You also don't know if you don't connect to that character, you don't care about the $100 million spent on special effects or whatever. But if you have someone and if you have actors that not only, know what they're doing, but connect to the character and are able to connect to that moment, then you could have, elephants drawn as stick figures coming across the screen and destroying things, and you'd care. And I think that's the best special effect I have is this amazing cast. So.
Was it difficult wrangling their schedules together because I think they have so many projects going on, and you can tell so much love. There's this politic of care put into this film. So how was it getting everyone together?
I mean, the cast bent over backwards to make the movie happen. People moved their schedules around. People called other people on the phone to help me get them in the cast. It really, it really. I mean, if you think about Taylor playing Mariah, that's in relation to the other roles, it's a smaller role, and even there were people being like, oh, she's not gonna play that, and I even said, look, it will feel like you are quote unquote underutilized, which I don't believe in, but and she was like, I just gotta be part of this and help make it happen. So that part, it didn't seem to be that hard. Yeah.
I'm gonna pass it to the audience. If you can raise your hand and then project, I will repeat the question so everyone can hear it, but I will pass it to you right here.
Hello, Boots. You had recently spoken just kind of like your homework, as it was, before going in the movie on Twitter. You had mentioned eating Jolly Ranchers, sniffing espresso in the sweat of your lover, but you particularly mentioned watching a movie called Black Cat, White Cat.
Yeah.
Um, I had actually watched it prior to, but I kind of wanted to dive a little more deeper in kind of what this movie kind of like projected onto for I Love Boosters. There is some little gags, I think, with like the little whistle that also shows up in this movie as kind of just like little bits.
So
But,
just
yeah.
to repeat the question for everyone, so how the film Black Cat, White Cat informed this,
Yeah,
the creation of
I
this
mean,
film?
there's just crazy chaos in the movie Black Cat, White Cat by Emir Kusturica, and the music for it was definitely an influence on this, and I was listening to that music. Matter of fact, I would send a link to that music to anybody I sent the script to and said, you gotta listen to this. And so I think the music was in the spirit of that, and the sort of messy chaos that's in that movie is also something that I really connected with.
Right there.
Hi, Roots.
Hey.
So we're at another time in this country where we're going through a big red scare where the specter of, socialism or communism is being used to demonize any kind of social justice. And taking this movie very explicitly about dialectical materialism, very explicitly a Marxist film, I was wondering what it was like to make in this environment. Was there ever any pushback around the, like, very explicitly, like, as you said, the goal of this movie is to get people involved in class struggle?
Yeah. Well, and for those who can't tell from the movie or don't know otherwise, I'm a communist. I believe we need a world in which the people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor. I actually, I see the attempt at a Red Scare happening in the media, but I think it's going the other way. Like, I think, you've got all sorts of surveys coming out from the right and from liberal think tanks saying that anywhere from 45 to 51% of people say they'd rather live in a socialist society. If you take out baby boomers, it goes up to 70-something percent. And, and then with things like Mamdani happening, it kind of shows where things are at. It shows where people are at. I think that part about it is I don't think the Red Scare is working, but I think what is happening is people are like, how the fuck do we do anything, right? How do we change anything where you've got people like Trump saying, I'm just gonna genocide a whole country, and I'm gonna say it because you can't do anything about it. And what effect does that have on folks? And what effect does it, where we know most people are against it. It's not even a case where they're trying to make us think people are for it. We know most people are against that, but we don't have any power. And I think that is because the left, even the radical left, since the beginning of the new left, has run away from actual class struggle, has run away from organizing on the job. And I think that has changed recently, though, in the last 6, 7, 10 years. Sorry if there's any 13-year-olds. I think that has been changing, and there are people organizing on the job. There are things like what happened in Minnesota that are very inspiring, that even though it was a one-day general strike that was more symbolic, it was very importantly symbolic, because it showed a lot of people that it could happen. And obviously, there needs to be a lot more organizing to get to a point where, and it was a lot more radical than a lot of things that happened. You had a whole state going on strike, not just for their own needs, not just for something to what might affect them at home, although it does, but for this larger goal and this larger unity. So that's there. I think to really now I'm getting around to your question. It's been the case to me that most of us are involved in making capitalism work. Most of us think we're the exception, that we're just doing it because there's nothing else we can do. And often that's because we haven't come into contact with a movement that we think can do something, right? We haven't come, and I think that's no different than some of the executives that are there, right? Well, let me back it up and tell a story that I'm gonna try to do this. It's not my story to tell, but I'm gonna tell it. I had this band with Tom Morello called Street Sweeper Social Club. He told me about a thing when Rage Against the Machine was filming a video on Wall Street and directed by Michael Moore. I forget what song it was. Anybody know? And it might have been like Killing in the Name of or something. And the idea was they were gonna go and play their music loud on Wall Street, blast it, and get shut down by the police and taken away. And Michael Moore was gonna film that, and that was the video. So they go there and they play the song, play it loud, nothing's happening, a couple cops are watching. They play it again, then the security doors close, but nothing's happening to them. And while they're playing the second song, he start hearing something going, rah, 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 rah. They don't know what it is. They play the song a couple more times, but this sound is getting louder. Rah, 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 rah. And then when they're about to play the fourth time, they see coming around the corner a giant mob of people in suits that obviously work on Wall Street. And as they get closer, they realize they're saying, "Suits for Rage! Suits for Rage!" And by them saying that, they realize the contradiction. That's why they're saying Suits for Rage. They realize there's a contradiction in what the music that they love is saying and what they're doing. And just like everybody, they probably didn't come into contact with the movement or didn't think it could win. And they were like, I'm gonna get a job because this is all there is. We can't change it. I'm just gonna get a job. And so I run into all sorts of people who, before Sorry to Bother You, would say the same thing I was told with things with the coup all the time. Yeah, this stuff doesn't make money. I agree with you, but it doesn't make money. And so once Sorry to Bother You happened, because they thought it was a more liberal politic because they were distracted by horse dicks, then, but it doesn't make money. And so once Sorry to Bother You happened, because they thought it was a more liberal politic because they were distracted by horse dicks, then that made a lot more times the money than it cost, and so they couldn't say that. And so therefore, a lot of executives were like, where they normally would have said, I agree with you, but this doesn't make money. They're like, I agree with you. And people are like, I'm glad I can get to work on something that I finally, that I agree with. And so I haven't really had a lot of pushback from that. The pushback I have is on other stuff that has nothing to do with the politic, that more has to do with what I think gets across the politic better. And it's more about creative stuff, like, do we really need that shot? Do we need, and that's the stuff that exists, but it's never really about the politic. I'll say, with I'm a Virgo, at the last take of this one scene, I had Kara Young's character, I said, this time say I'm a communist, and I threw that in there. And at first, they were trying to say, well, you know, that scene is boring. Let's cut it because it's boring. It drags it down. But every time they did the survey, everybody was like, we love that scene the most. So that's the closest to something, but they wouldn't even have said that it had to do with the politics.
Right in the back. Sure, and then we'll go to the Go ahead.
I am so sorry. Hi. I noticed a lot in this movie. There's a lot of very interesting ways of subtext that you use color and costume specifically, and I thought that was very intriguing and very awesome to watch. I wanted to know, given set pieces and costumes, if there's any way or inspirations that you have for this movie particularly, and even some of your other work.
I mean, there's so many inspirations, and I try to wear them on my sleeve as much as possible. But I will also have multiple inspirations in any one shot sometimes. And I would say like a general thing is I also, you know, when you're doing, when you're making hip hop and you're like looking for a thing that nobody else has and figuring out how this little thing goes on top of that and makes something new. I often will also look for inspiration that's outside of cinema for what I'm doing, right? So I would say that a lot of, and try to figure out what's my version of that. So a lot of like collage art, like, you know, Romare Bearden, or Parliament Funkadelic, the way there's a lot of textures and styles put on top of each other, or, you know, so things like that. But then you think about, the cinematic things, I think, are really just right there in front, like Jacques Tati, Jerry Lewis, Looney Tunes, you know, there was somebody on Twitter that said something that I agreed with. They said it's like mahogany mixed with Willy Wonka. And so, yeah, like I'm usually never being like, I'm gonna make this shot like this, you know. And it's more like kind of letting it like wash over me, and then coming with an idea that, you know, and then I have the idea that I want to get across to guide me, and using all of those things. So, I mean, and it's often just exaggerating and hyperbolizing. So there is a building in San Francisco that leans a little bit, right? The Millennium Tower. So I just took it a little bit further. And, you know, yeah, so it's just like thinking of situations and doing it. And then some of the stuff just happens as we're making it. So we needed to cut a lot of money at one point. And one of the things that people were trying to cut was the flashback of Jianhu when she was talking about China. Like, she could just say it, right? And so as I was toying with that would that even work? I was like, oh, okay, it could just be a play on her head, right? It was gonna be a stage play. But then it was, in order to do that, was gonna I got that okay, but then that cost was so much that we might as well have shot the flashback, so that's what we did. And then I kept the theater thing. So it's like, just as you go, you figure stuff, you know, figure stuff out, and there's a lot of those things. But yeah, I'm always like trying to do things, you know, obviously like Jason and the Argonauts, things like that, yeah, they're just always flowing in and out of me. So, all right.
Right here.
Hi,
Hey.
my name's Gabby. I'm here with a bunch of my
Hey,
comrades.
all right.
I'm a labor organizer,
All
love your
right.
work.
Thank you.
And a question that I have is, how do you balance the need for organizing on the ground in your workplace with the need for artistic cultural experiences that move people to get involved in the class struggle? screenings of Sorry to Bother You with some of the workers that I organized with, and it definitely gets folks' minds turning.
Okay.
But then there's also the need to just be on the ground and confront your boss and do all of that.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, you would know better than I do. I mean, I'm not doing what you're doing. I'm making this, and hopefully it's something that you and folks like you can use. But yeah, I think after a while, it's more about the talking and organizing with people and building a base with them and figuring out campaigns that will move them to the left. I don't know what the balance is. Hopefully the art is just something that can be used to wrap around what you do, because I mean, I had a time where I had, after my second album, I had quit doing music because I was like having a midlife crisis at 24. And I said, oh, I've been spending my adult life being an artist. And I quit, and we made an organization called the Young Comrades. But while I was doing that, I started during our campaigns, I realized kind of what I had left behind, because everybody, when they were talking about things, were referencing music at the time, or movies, and things like that. And some of those things that we would have to push back against. And so I then went back in with an idea that I really needed to make the art, but I don't think it's nearly as important as what you're doing, right? So, but I think it's something that can be useful. I don't know exactly what you mean by the balance, but it sounds like you got a good balance going on right now. Yeah.
We are running out of time, so I'm
Sorry,
gonna
I
wrap
talked
up.
so long.
No,
Yeah.
but thank you so much.
All right.
To wrap up, I do want to ask two more questions. The
Okay.
first, talking a bit about what appears to be a good amount of practical effects in the film, and possibly stop motion puppeteering. So if you could speak to that, those sequences in the film, the decision to really go all in with practical effects there.
Okay. Yeah, no, I am into practical effects because I think texture, having different textures, having different colors that are actually there and not as digitized, I think they make you experience the movie in different ways. I'm often trying to not only bring people in, but push them away at the same time, so they understand this is something that was made, right? I mean, people understand that, but while you're watching it, where you're thinking about the intention of the artist, I really, I think it extends from, for a long time, even though I was a rapper, I hated people that thought of themselves as poets, right? I hated, there was a time when I really did not like spoken word, because I felt like a rapper will be like, I'm raw, I'm the best, I'm sexy. And a poet will be like, I'm not really, I am really raw and I'm sexy, but I'm gonna say that I'm gonna say it in a different way, so you think I don't care about saying that. And it just didn't feel as honest to me. And so I'm into doing something where people are thinking about it being made and it being, right, and they experience it in a different way. Not that it doesn't envelop you, but you're aware of that at the same time. And I think practical effects in front of the camera, just right now, maybe I would think it differently if everybody was always doing practical effects, and then I'd be into CGI for that reason. But because it will feel differently, we want to put stuff in front of the screen. So yes, we have stop motion that my folks, Mystery Meat from Oakland, they did the stop motion skinless people. We have miniatures. The chase scene is happening in miniatures. Originally, only the mall part was going to be a miniature, and we were going to try to shoot the rest of that on San Francisco streets, and we didn't have the budget to do it. And as we were trying to figure it out and cut down the number of shots, the guy, Chris Warren, that runs the miniature shop was like, hey, I got all these buildings right here, let's just blah, blah, blah. You know, and I was like, okay, cool. And so that's like another thing of how things just kind of develop, and it's so lucky that we didn't have the money to shoot it on the street, right? You know, like everything we did, like the effect, for instance, that is happening when you look at Pinky Ring Guy on a close-up, that's just this, you know, we were trying to figure out how to do it. We knew we wanted to do it practically. We had lights and kaleidoscope set up and all that, and then Panavision, they really love our DP, Natasha Breyer, and they invented this sort of accordion lens that basically is just us doing this while we're, you know, accordioning it while we're seeing them. And, you know, so there's all sorts of things like that that are happening. When we push back and the racks of clothes are going past, and all of these things are things you really have to fight for, because you're always not going to have enough money. And there's always the question of like, do we need that? And so this thing has like almost every scene, a thing like that. Do we need that? And that took us, you know, hours of figuring it out in a warehouse, and then, you know, exactly how to do it, and then doing this on a day. And our days were such, because it was so packed with things, that really we were doing most things in anywhere from 1 to 3 takes, right? And so, you know, you really start feeling it. Well, and I mean, it was really expensive to have a set canted to the side at 15 degrees, and because every shot is a stunt, right? People had to have harnesses, things like that. Because when I wrote it in the script, I had it at 25 degrees. So, and I didn't really, you know how that, and my production designer talked me into 15 degrees. And I was like thinking I was just making this really bad compromise and going half-assed. But when you stand on it, you know, you feel dizzy, and it's pretty crazy. And there are things like that where they're like, you know what, if we didn't have this, we could do all this other stuff. And so a lot of it comes down to cutting, you know, figuring out, okay, we can shoot this with just a one-wall set. So there's a lot of one-wall sets. That's one thing. Peter Greenaway, the cook, the thief, his wife and her lover, you know, there's a lot of that influence in there. Matter of fact, I use that to sell, like, yeah, we could do it in one wall sets. We don't even have to spend money on the other walls, you know? So there's a lot of stuff like that where we're like, and if we do that, then we can turn this way, and that could be a whole nother location, right? So we had to do a lot of that stuff. And that's some of the fun of it, like, and it makes you make choices that you wouldn't do if you had other luxuries. So, also though, when they're spraying, we were trying to figure out that. We were like, okay, maybe at the end of the day, we'll just get a big, you know, we'll have a big water truck, and at the end of the day, each day, we'll just spray water for the device, and that was like gonna be a lot of money. And so we tried all sorts of different things, and we were gonna shoot it full scale in black, but then we just figured out it was a water hose, you know? We shot a water hose against black, and we were able to do different angles with it.
Thank you for that. And my final question for you, the film ends on a very hopeful note that there is a better world possible with collective struggle, and I think it's very emphasized by the soundtrack at the end. It's very hopeful. There is a lot of power in Kiki's voice, and I know you talked a bit about who wrote the songs, who helped put this together, so if you could speak to the person who collaborated with
And before I get to that, Tune Yards did the score, and you know, I probably worked with them when I was like 20 pages in, and I was like, here goes some pages, let's start going. And that theme song that you heard a bunch of times, you know, that was the first. Matter of fact, a lot of it is really just the first demo that they did. The songs at the end are all written by my daughter, and she had the song Cassandra already, and at one point I was like, this is exactly what Corvette, who we made her real name be Cassandra in there. They talk about that, what she's going through, and I actually was playing the demo to Kiki, and she was like, we gotta put this in the movie. We gotta put this in the movie. So we went and cut it, and it was beautiful. And she was like, does Alina's my daughter, does she have more songs? And then she came with a bunch more. And we're putting that out as its own soundtrack. Kiki Palmer, I Love Booster soundtrack, and that'll come out May 1st.
All right, thank you so much, Philadelphia. Thank you so much, Boots Riley. Let's give it up.
Thank you. And check this out. Okay, we need your help. I know Neon is the hot shit right now. They're the hot indie distributor and studio, but we don't got it covered. We need to get this movie out there. We need your help. We need you to post about this, to talk about this. We need you to come back on May 22nd with a bunch of people. And people need to see this, so I need to see that happen. So I need your help in that. And if you like it, post about it. If you don't like it, just write it on a little piece of paper. Tuck it in your pocket for safekeeping. Tell people something about it in a few years. And then the last thing, I need to take a picture with y'all.